Okay, so picture this. You're on a trip around the world. You're exploring, right, like ancient ruins and stuff. And you start to notice these like oddly similar features in structures from totally different cultures, like way different, separated by oceans. It's kind of like finding a secret handshake, but like passed down through time. And it makes you wonder, could there have been like one single super influential culture, like way back in the day?
It's a question that's had like historians and archaeologists scratching their heads for centuries.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, while the traditional thinking is like civilizations just kind of popped up in isolation, right? There's this growing body of evidence that's pointing to a much more interconnected ancient world, more than we thought.
Way more connected. Okay, so that's where this researcher paper we're looking at today comes in. It's from the Institute for Natural Philosophy. And they call it, get this, Statement of Significance Global Hallmarks.
That's free.
Total clickbait. But in all seriousness, it lays out this like pretty bold theory, basically saying there was at the very least some shared wellspring of knowledge that left its mark all over the globe. And they call these recurring features, these similarities, Global Ancient Hallmarks, or GAH for short.
So much easier that way, right?
Right. But we're talking about everything here, from sound frequencies and how structures lined up with the Earth's energy to crazy precise stonework and even these mysterious markings called nubs.
Yeah, the nubs are super interesting.
They really are. So before I get too far, can you give us like a quick breakdown? What's crucial to understand about this whole GAH thing?
Totally. So the main thing to remember is they're not saying this was the only culture doing their thing back then, right? It's more like, could there have been a dominant force, like a source of knowledge that spread super far and wide, and that it kind of left its fingerprints on, the foundation of civilization as we know it?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. It's like a parent culture. But those fingerprints, they're all over the place, like literally. I gotta say, when I was reading this paper, what really jumped out at me were those nubs. They're like carved bumps and protrusions you find on ancient structures, but like everywhere. We're talking like Ollantaytambo in Peru to the Bolevy Mausoleum in
Exactly. And they're not just random bumps,
Oh, yeah, totally. They seem intentional, like way intentional.
The researchers really emphasize how these nubs show up in all these geometric shapes. Like there's semicircular or square or triangular. They're not just like slapping them on there. They incorporate them into the structure carefully.
Right.
And it's that level of like care that really makes you think, this wasn't just functional,
Yeah, it's like, why go to all that trouble just for looks? There's got to be more to it, right?
Right. So it raises all these fascinating questions about like their purpose. Were they symbolic? A way of like visually communicating something, or maybe they had a deeper meaning, like something connected to what the structure was used for, or even like astronomical alignments.
Whoa, okay. It's like a secret code, but like carved in stone. It definitely gets the imagination going. But speaking of seriously impressive stuff, what about this crazy polygonal stonework? The research uses examples from like the Sacred Valley in Peru, and these stones are massive, right? But they fit together so perfectly, it's hard to believe they did it without like lasers and power tools.
I know, right? The level of craftsmanship is mind-blowing. We're talking about stones that weigh tons, and they're often like irregularly shaped, and yet they fit together so tightly you couldn't even slide a piece of paper between them.
Seriously.
And it's not just a Peru thing either. You see this mastery of engineering in ancient structures all over the place.
Right.
Like think about the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt, or the walls of Sacsayhuaman, again in Peru.
I've seen pictures. It's insane.
Totally.
Yeah.
And like, how did they do it? What techniques were they using? We're still trying to figure that out.
It blows my mind to think about it. It's like they had this deep, deep understanding of like geometry and physics that we're only just starting to like rediscover.
Yeah, totally.
And it's not just the stonework either, right? This research goes into how a lot of ancient structures seem to be designed to like play with sound in very specific ways, like the Hypogeum of Malta. It's this underground complex, and it's got these chambers and alcoves, and they all seem to be like intentionally designed to make sound resonate at certain frequencies.
And the Hypogeum is super interesting because unlike a lot of ancient structures that were used for like rituals or big gatherings, it doesn't have natural resonance. So it's not like they were just trying to amplify sound in the usual way.
So what were they doing?
Well, some researchers think they were using these chambers to create specific acoustic effects, maybe for rituals, or even to like induce altered states of consciousness.
Whoa. Okay, now that's what I call a deep dive. It's like they were tapping into like the hidden power of sound. but in ways we're just starting to understand.
Exactly. And this whole connection to sound and energy, it leads us to another super interesting part of this research. Telluric currents.
Okay, I've had that term before, but I'm a little fuzzy on the details. Tell me more about these telluric currents. What are they, and how do they tie into all of this?
So imagine these like invisible lines of energy. They're crisscrossing the globe, kind of like the veins of a living being. These are telluric currents. They're natural flows of energy that happen within the Earth's crust.
So, like, the Earth has its own energy system.
Exactly. And what's really wild is that a lot of ancient sites, especially the ones with these global ancient hallmarks we've been talking about, and especially the ones with significant acoustic properties, they're located directly on these energy lines.
No way, you're kidding. So it's like they had a map of the Earth's energy field way before Google Maps. That's incredible. So they weren't just master builders, they were like sound engineers and energy workers.
Yeah.
It's as if they saw these places not just as geographic locations, but like power spots, places of significance. This is mind-blowing. But, okay, if these global ancient hallmarks really are evidence of some shared knowledge, how did it spread, like, across the entire planet? We're talking about a time long before airplanes and the internet.
Exactly. That's where things get even more interesting.
So how do we go from these, like, shared features popping up in a few places to evidence of a globally influential culture? It feels like a huge leap.
It's definitely a complex issue, but the research paper lays out a pretty compelling case. They basically go deep on the global distribution of these hallmarks. Like, take the flightless bird motif, for example. We see it a lot at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. It's one of the oldest known temple complexes we've got, almost 12,000 years old.
Göbekli Tepe is already, like, mind-blowing just on its own, right? The massive stones, those crazy carvings. It's like stepping back in time to the civilization that just, like, vanished. Poof.
Exactly. And get this, that same flightless bird motif, we also see it in ancient carvings in places like Peru and Egypt. Cultures separated by, like, oceans and thousands of years.
Okay, but couldn't that just be a coincidence? Like maybe that specific bird was just, a popular design choice back in the day?
It's possible, but the odds of it happening over and over with all these specific details, they get smaller and smaller. And the research, it points out other examples too, like the double serpent motif. It pops up in cultures that are like totally different. The Aztecs in Mesoamerica, the ancient Egyptians.
Right, but those are two different kinds of snakes. Right.
True, but the symbolism, the double heads, it's strikingly similar. Plus, there are the scrape marks that we see. They're super intricate and they're found on crazy hard stones like andesite. These marks, they would have taken serious skill and precision to make. Even with today's tools, it wouldn't be easy.
So they're not just like accidental scratches.
No way. And we find them in places like the Nageshwara Temple in India and on stones used in those ancient Peruvian structures we were talking about.
It's like finding a fingerprint, but instead of a person, it links all these different cultures across like all of time and space.
Exactly. And it's not just these visual motifs or techniques. Like there's the case of keystone cuts. They're found in doorways or archways, and they show up in structures built from wood, metal, and stone, and not just in one place, but across so many different cultures. So the fact that they use this technique with all these different materials, it makes you think maybe there was a shared understanding of like how to build stuff, structural principles, not just random chance.
Okay, so we've got all these crazy similarities. Motifs, carving, building. It's hard to say it's just a coincidence at this point. But how could they share all this knowledge? Back then, it was a long time ago.
$1 million question, right? The research, it goes through a few possibilities.
Yeah.
One theory is that ancient trade routes, they were way more extensive than we usually think. So maybe they facilitated this exchange of ideas and technologies. Like, imagine sailors and merchants going super long distances, and they're bringing not just stuff to trade, but also knowledge, stories. And those ideas, they spread and influence people all over the place.
So the ancient world was like way more globalized than we tend to think.
A possibility, right?
It makes you think about all those journeys, the connections, all those stories just waiting to be uncovered.
Exactly. And then there's this other theory that's like seriously captivating, the theory of a lost mother culture.
Ooh. Okay, so we're talking like Atlantis.
Well,
a super advanced civilization that just disappeared.
Well, maybe not Atlantis, but you get the idea. This civilization, it would have been lost to time, but its knowledge was so advanced it influenced cultures all over the planet.
That's wild. A lost civilization with super advanced knowledge. Okay, that's cool and all, but wouldn't there be like more evidence. Like, shouldn't we have found something by now?
It's the challenge, right? Trying to find proof of a civilization that predates, like, a written history. It's not easy. But we got all these global hallmarks, right? And they're everywhere. It's hard to say it's just a coincidence.
It's like these hallmarks, they're echoes from the past, whispering to us, telling us to put the pieces together. But I do have one question. Couldn't some of these similarities be explained by, like, convergent evolution?
What do you mean?
Like, maybe different cultures, they face the same problems, so they came up with the same solutions, completely separate from each other.
That's a good point. And to be fair, the research does say that, yeah, it's possible that happened in some cases. But there are just so many of these global hallmarks. And they're consistent across such huge distances and time periods. It can't all be a coincidence, can it?
So basically, the more we learn about the ancient world, the more we realize we don't know as much as we thought.
Pretty much.
That's kind of exciting.
Right. These hallmarks, they're like whispers from the past. Hints at a level of interconnectedness that we're just starting to understand. And they make us ask, like, what if they knew way more than we thought? What else is out there just waiting to be found?
Okay, so what does all of this mean? How does it change how we think about history, about ourselves?
Well, that's what everyone's trying to figure out.
So we're talking about like a total rethink of history here. Like if ancient cultures were sharing ideas and tech all over the place and way earlier than we thought, I mean, what does that do to our understanding of, well, everything? History, technology, even what humans are capable of.
It's huge, right?
Yeah.
Makes you think maybe we haven't been paying attention. Like, what if instead of just going from simple to advanced, like, human civilization, it's more like it had these peaks and valleys. What if there were these times with crazy innovation and connection, but we just, like, lost the records?
Okay, so it's not just that we're discovering something new, it's like we're rediscovering something that was lost. That's kind of mind-blowing and also, like, kind of a bummer. Imagine what we could have accomplished if we'd never lost that knowledge in the first place.
Right, and that actually brings up another point that research makes. What if these global ancient hallmarks, all this shared stuff we've been talking about, what if it wasn't just about function or symbolism?
Right.
What if it was a language?
Whoa. Okay, so like a secret language that only ancient civilizations knew.
Maybe not so much a secret language, but think about it, like a language that's, built into the structures. A language that's more about, like, expressing something universal, deeper than just words.
So not just talking to each other, but like talking to the universe.
Exactly. What if they were trying to express, I don't know, an understanding of the cosmos?
Yeah.
Or the way everything is connected. Like, this was knowledge that was too important to lose, so they wove it into the fabric of these structures so it would last forever.
Okay, so it's like their version of the internet, but carved in stone. A way to pass on wisdom through the ages. So what happened? How do we lose the instruction manual?
That's the big mystery, isn't it? But it makes you think. Like, we look at these ancient structures, and we're amazed by their tech, the way they align things with the stars, the sheer size of it all. And we're just starting to figure it out, right?
Mhm.
So imagine what we're missing. What if their understanding of, well, everything was way beyond anything we can even imagine?
It's like we're trying to read a book in a language we don't understand. We can see the letters, but we don't know what they mean.
Exactly. It's both humbling and kind of exciting,
Totally. But it also seems like maybe a little frustrating for the researchers. Like, how do you even start to unravel a mystery like that?
That's archaeology for you. Always more questions than answers. But seriously, I think the important thing is to keep an open mind, right? We have to be willing to consider ideas that might sound crazy.
Because the crazier it sounds, the more likely it is to be true.
Well, not always.
Mm.
But sometimes the most important discoveries, they come from challenging what we think we know.
Mm.
We got to keep digging, literally and figuratively, and asking those what-if questions.
Because the more we learn about the past, the more we realize just how much is still out there.
Right. And who knows, maybe by trying to understand these ancient cultures, we might just end up understanding ourselves a little bit better too.
That's a wrap on another deep dive. Make sure to check out the show notes for links to the research and all the amazing sites we talked about. And until next time, keep exploring.